I think Cowork will be the place where most business people will park it and say, wow.
Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the eCommerce Evolution Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Curry, CEO of OMG Commerce. And today I have a returning guest, a multi-time guest, maybe like fourth or fifth time, my good friend for a long time, fellow Missouri resident, Russ Henneberry. And for those who don't know, Russ led some teams at Digital Marketer, used to help run the Traffic and Conversion, or TNC Summit, back in its glory days, which that was just a rich, fun time.
R.I.P.
in this industry. R.I.P. to TNC. It's so true. But you and I met like in 2010 or something at a marketing conference in St. Louis, Missouri, the Lou.
Yeah.
And really connected then. And so, but more recently, you are the founder of the Click.ai. You're also the co-author of Digital Marketing for Dummies. And when I have AI questions, when I want to know, like, what are people doing with AI inside of agencies and inside of marketing orgs, I talk to Russ Henneberry. And so with that, Russ, welcome back to the show. And how's it going?
Real good, man. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing good. Just feel like every day is, going to unlock something new on the AI front. And exciting, disorienting, scary, but mostly exciting. And so,
I didn't know how bored I was with marketing until until we got like this. This technology has reinvigorated me for sure.
Yeah, and it's also one of those interesting things where obviously AI is progressing very rapidly. And I heard someone say on a podcast just yesterday, they were like, "No, 2026 is going to be the year of the most rapid disruption ever on AI." And I'm like, okay, yeah, and there'll be more disruption this year than in all the AI years past or whatever. So buckle up, which is fun for sure. So I want to dive into a few things. I want to talk into, agentic AI and kind of how things are flowing and just some of the latest news. But also you're plugged into agencies, marketing orgs, brands, and you're seeing how they're using AI and what you're doing with AI. But I think maybe the first place to start, because I know this is something you were just absolutely bullish on, as am I, and that's Claude Cowork. And so it's just absolutely ripping right now. All my business friends are using it. I just started testing it actually just this past Saturday, started tinkering with it, and holy cow. So for those who don't know, what is Claude Cowork? And then let's dive into some applications.
Well, so there's a few things about Claude Cowork. We've probably all used regular ChatGPT, regular Claude, regular Gemini or whatever. The new thing about Claude Cowork, so it's a desktop app right now, only available on Mac. And the big three differences I think to think about with Cowork is first that it is far more agentic. So it makes plans and unfolds those plans like right in front of your eyes. So you can ask it far more ambitious tasks than you could with a regular chatbot. And the reason it's able to pull this off from watching it work is that it works with your local files. So it can create files, it can delete files, it can move files around. And one of the most important types of files that it produces is called a skill.md file, or a skill file. And that skill file, you can think of it like you would think of a custom GPT or a Gemini gem, but it's just a set of instructions as to how you want something executed. And here's the crazy part about this is that when you're working inside a Claude Cowork and you do something, or you can even describe something that you want done, it can build that skill file and then just save it into your, into your directory, right? So it starts to organize this entire set of folders and files. And, one quick tip on this is that when you do go to start to play with this, like go slow and just kind of think through how you want that folder set up, that structure set up. Because if you've worked with something like ChatGPT before and you create a custom GPT that does X, like let's say it writes hooks, right, for ads or something. So it's a custom GPT that's really good at writing ad hooks. Maybe it's personalized for your business and your persona and all these things. So it's an excellent GPT. But the problem is with it is that it's saved in the cloud. And if it's not performing properly, you have to go back over there, edit it, and you gotta, go in there, figure out where it's messing up and change it. Well, you don't do that in Claude Cowork. So if it produces an output and you say, you know what, you're being way too hypey with those hooks. Like those hooks are way too hypey. I like this one because it's a little more down to earth and that's a little more on brand. It'll go back and edit the skill. So it'll just be like, it'll ask you for it. Say, you want me to go and adjust the skill so that I just nail this for you every time. And so these skills are almost like self-healing, right? Wow. Like they build themselves pretty much, right? Like they ask you, like, do you want me to build a skill?
Self-improvement or recursive almost, yeah.
Right. And it all is happening on your local machine. In other words, there's a version control part of this as well. So one of the things I've always recommended with AI is that the very first piece of information that you need to feed any AI when you're doing anything about marketing or business growth is a persona document. Like you need to know who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. So it always boggles my mind when people are like, oh, my AI doesn't give me very good output. And it's like, well, does it know anything about who you're trying to reach or who you're talking to, who you're writing to, who you're planning for? The second document that I always recommend is a document that clearly outlines your offer. So like, what do you sell? What's the cost? Do you have a guarantee? Do you, what are the deliverables, et cetera, right? Those two pieces of information. And most of us have kind of caught on to that we could feed the AI this and we feed it that and it gets much, much better. The problem has been that there's a version control problem. So you build a GPT and you attach these persona and offer over here, and then you build another GPT, you got to attach a second one and a third one. But in Claude Cowork, since you're working from a file system and it's basically just plugging a brain onto Claude Cowork, there's a single persona.md file, markdown file, or it could be I guess it would be a text file if you wanted it to be, but Claude builds markdown files that, you can adjust that one place, right? And anytime it needs that persona or it needs that offer or it needs this skill or it needs this spreadsheet or it needs whatever, it just goes and finds it. It's very, very, very good at understanding when it needs a particular piece of context that's, located somewhere in your brain. So
it's amazing. It's amazing. I think it's still a little bit trippy for people, and they're still maybe not fully wrapping their heads around it. But I mean, Claude Cowork can really become your personal assistant in a lot of ways, your research assistant, your marketing assistant, your copywriter, like all those things. But more than just a chatbot, it's just like doing things, right? It's just running things. And so maybe you could talk through some specific examples, like either how have you used Claude Cowork? I'll explain kind of what I was experimenting with this weekend as well, but how have you used it? What are some of the best use cases you've seen from agencies and brands? Like what can this do for us?
Right. So one of the other things about Claude is that, and I think this is the Claude ecosystem in general, is how good they've gotten at connecting to external sources. So for example, I've connected my Notion to it. And so Claude Cowork can just go fetch something out of, so for example, when I start a Zoom meeting now, my Notion starts to transcribe those notes using Notion's AI, which is cool. But at the same time, do I do anything with that? Do I do much with it? And so my workflow now, though, that I've got Claude connected to Notion is, I jump on a Zoom meeting. Like I did a webinar today, a training today with some people. I did 90 minutes on Claude or on ChatGPT projects, and I was going through that, and then Notion's transcribing, and then at the end I can run a skill through my Claude Cowork that just says, go grab that transcript and do X to it, right? So I think that's really the unlock here, is to understand that we have to have sources of material. Like where is the source of some idea, some data, some source, and how can we plug that in? And then what do we want to happen? And if we know those two things, like what do we have to put into the AI, and then what do we want to happen from there? Even if we can just describe it, the AI will figure it out from there, and then it'll ask you, do you want me to just build a skill that does this every time? So you talked about, before we jumped on, like doing things with your financials and stuff like that. So dropping some source material into your Claude brain, if you will, spreadsheets, etc., and then pointing Claude Cowork at it and saying, like, I want you to, transform this into whatever. It could be charts, graphs, insights, whatever. And then at the end saying, write that up as a skill, right? And or even a full routine. So I mentioned about trying to get a little more ambitious with what we're asking.
What's the difference between a skill and a routine? Can you talk about that real quickly?
Well, a skill would be the technical term for it inside of Claude. But I do think about these things as routines. So for example, when I arrive at my desktop, I just open Claude Cowork and I say, good morning. And that triggers a routine, but it's really a skill. So it's written into a skill file, but I think of it as a routine because what it does is it greets me. It puts my manifesto out, which is like this thing that I like to read each day. And so it's got steps. And then the next step is pulls my weather, because I'm always wanting to know what the weather is when I'm sitting inside at my desk all day.
Isn't that funny? But we both live in Missouri, right? So typical Midwest. It's like it's gonna be 70 degrees. A few days from now, it was like -5 a couple weeks ago. It's just crazy. But but like it matters. We're sitting in the AC or the heat, so we're fine. But we still want to know. But yeah, like you want to kind of run this skill or this routine, right? So what else does it do for you in the morning?
It goes and grabs everything out of my calendar and displays that for me, and then it pulls the top, 5 headlines out of off of several sources about things that I'm interested in, and pulls them in and gets my news and stuff. But not that this is like tremendously groundbreaking. What it is it's a routine. It's something that I told do this, then this, then this, then this, and this, right? And it just writes it into a skill file, sits it into my Claude brain there, and then anytime I say good morning. So the same deal with my newsletter. So I write a newsletter each week. It's quite involved. It has several parts to it. And I used to have like 15 GPTs going and like different deep research prompts that I had to keep copying and pasting. Instead, now, once I ran through the process one time the way I wanted it, I just said, create skills for that. Like create skills that format this into this, create skills that do this deep research. And so now it's just more or less like, hey, I'm building the newsletter. It's like, cool, where do you want to start? And it's like, let's start with this. And it goes out and does the research. And the thing is, you can spin up multiple tasks at the same time. So it's like it goes off, does the deep research, open a new task, start something else up. And, the way Claude is built, way Claude Cowork is built, is that it can work in parallel. So it does things a heck of a lot faster than you would think it would be able to do something, because it'll spin up, 4, 5, 6 agents at the same time. Each one, this might get a little technical, but each one has its own context window. So
Yep.
So in other words, this one's out there doing this. It's literally like running five Claudes at the same time.
Right. Which this is actually important. So let's talk about context window a little bit, because I first heard about this on the Andrew Ferris podcast recently. But what I think a lot of people don't know is if you give Claude a really big file, or maybe like a transcript from a really long call, it's not necessarily crawling all of that, right? Like it's maybe looking at the end and the beginning and maybe summarizing some things. And if you give Claude a whole bunch of stuff, like all in one prompt or something, it's going to take shortcuts, right? Potentially. And so like,
Yeah.
but having multiple agents, you can have a lot more context that you're feeding the AI. Hey, thanks again for tuning in. This episode is brought to you by OMG Commerce. That's my agency. Hey, we're specialists at creating omni-channel growth for brands profitably. Now, the greatest brands we know are no longer just D2C. Yes, they're masters of D2C, but they're also growing and scaling on marketplaces and in retail stores. And we understand the complexities of how to grow in all of those channels, from a campaign strategy, a creative strategy, and a measurement strategy. In fact, we recently won a Google Agency Excellence Award for helping Arctic Coolers grow their retail sales in Walmart using YouTube. We've helped add almost 8 figures in growth on Amazon for brands, and we've even helped a brand go from 9 to 10 figures. And so we want to help you grow. So if you're not satisfied with your growth in any of those channels, or you're looking to unlock new growth, we should probably chat. Visit us at omgcommerce.com. Click that Let's Talk button. We love to schedule a strategy session with you. With that, back to the show.
Yeah, and the thing is, like right now we have Opus 4.6. We've got Gemini 3 or whatever. We've got, these models are all very, very intelligent, but Claude Cowork really isn't a breakthrough in intelligence as much as a breakthrough in sort of architecture of how the tool works, right? Like, it's not that the tool is that much smarter, although it's a little bit smarter. These tools get incrementally smarter every couple of months. They release, something that's smart, but it's the UI that's different, right? And it's sort of what's under the hood that's different about Claude Cowork. And it does take a little bit of getting the hang of how it works. But once you get going, it's actually super good at like kind of walking you through. Like, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? And so if you're going to play around with Claude Cowork, I would just say, start with a simple use case and just start to type and watch it start to build something out for you. It's pretty amazing. The other thing that's really interesting about these skills, right, is that they're extremely shareable. So, for example, I've built out an entire workflow around building my newsletter, and it's in my membership. I'm just going to give it to my people. So it's like, here's a zip file. It's got all the skills in it and all the context in it that it needs. And so just upload it, zip it, upload it, and now you have that skill. So pretty cool too that, and there's little marketplaces springing up that are, thousands of skills, like anything you could think of that are already there. You just download the zip it, upload it inside of Claude as a new skill. And I think I'd be a little careful about that.
Good to quote the old the song there. Yeah. You must
be a little careful about downloading other people's skills because, people do stupid stuff like
right.
The instructions and stuff like that. But it is an interest. It's a different way of working with AI that, I think OpenAI sort of dropped the ball with not updating how custom GPTs work all this time. And now skills have come along and Claude Cowork's come along, and the two together, it's a combination that's hard to beat.
It's a winning combo, yeah. So a couple things I want to unpack, and I'll kind of talk through a little bit of what I did this weekend and where I think this is going to unlock some pretty cool stuff for my agency. You talked about connections, and so basically what I wanted to do, we got this very detailed financial dashboard that's got everything in there: client revenue, cost of employees, cost of different service items. We kind of group our expenses into delivery, or all the team, all the tools that deliver services, into growth, so sales and marketing expenses and tools and payroll, and then ops, right? So all the tools and overhead and employees and stuff that fit there. But I wanted to analyze some things, and so sometimes it's kind of hard. Like, what do we dump into what spreadsheet or whatever? And so basically, I gave Claude, I was like, hey, this is a framework that I want to work within. Here's some of our goals. Net revenue retention is a number we're going to start tracking regularly. We did this in the past, but the calculations are actually kind of difficult, and building that into a spreadsheet is also kind of a pain in the butt. But basically, that's where you're looking at starting revenue for a beginning period of time. And so we just take the beginning of the year. What's our starting revenue? Over time, then, minus any churn, so logo churn or clients to churn, minus contraction. So maybe a client didn't churn, but they reduced scope. So now they're spending less. So it's beginning revenue minus those two things, plus expansion, meaning, yeah, but some clients actually add to scope and actually do more work with us. And so then what is that? That's net revenue retention. Basically, I started like, hey, Claude, this is what I want to do. Claude Cowork. It's like, oh, cool. Well, do you want me to connect with QuickBooks so I can connect directly to QuickBooks? I'm like, well, why don't you just look at this Google Sheet first? And then it's like, oh, this is a gold mine of information, right? And so then it started spitting stuff out. And then I started talking about some of the sales goals and stuff and looked at our sales pipeline and the sales goal sheet that I put together. And I started to say, hey, this is good. Here's where you maybe have some weaknesses. And then so it like spit out these different analyses. And I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome. And so right now I've just got to like looking at our Google Sheets, because you can like do the browser plugin, right, where it looks at the Google Sheets and can read it, or you can upload an Excel file, or you can plug it into QuickBooks, right? So there's different ways you can run this. And so yeah, it's going to be a real unlock for financial insights. Because we don't have a huge finance team. And so that it's going to be very, very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's it's a good bet that every day that goes by, the people doing work at computers are going to spend a little bit less time outside of an AI tool than the day before. So as AI tools like Claude Cowork keep developing connections to other outside tools, and they've already got that protocol in place called MCP, and everybody's pretty much on board with it and starting to connect everything together, it'll just become sort of a push and pull type of a situation where, I'm able to just pull this from here. And the nice thing is that, you got this sort of central terminal with intelligence inside of it, and you can pull from disparate sources and pull things together and, make either create new things or get new analysis out of those connected things. And what it does is it's opening up things that you just never, you never would have had time to do, without these tools. So, a small company now can do things that large companies have been able to do for a long time, because they have a whole team of financial, you know what I'm saying? Like you had a whole
totally. Yeah. A whole finance department,
there that's running all this analysis and doing all this stuff. But because they got to pull from all this stuff, and it takes like human effort to like get through all that. But what I would encourage you to do, and you probably did do, is as you're working through something manually, you can always pause and stop and say, okay, I got this kind of how I wanted it, sort of manually, but even using the AI, so it's not completely manual, but you understand, like you're just kind of prompting through. And you get to this sort of end state, and you're like, that's what I wanted. That's when it's a good time to pause and reverse engineer into a skill, or even if you're using ChatGPT, you reverse into a custom GPT. Say, I want you to take a look at everything we did here in the end output, and I want you to codify this, right? And create the instructions to get here like that, right? And the nice thing about Cowork is it knows, like if you said, if you said something like, I want to run the financial analysis again, or give it some other kind of name, it'll know to go grab that skill.
Shows what to do.
And then it has a lot more autonomy. Like it'll go and run several steps up ahead, right? And it might hit a point where it's like, I need some input back from Brett. And so it's going to come back and say, you want me to do this way?
Yeah.
And you just select that. And sometimes it'll write that into the skill so it doesn't need to ask again. And so it's really quite intuitive in that way. And it's just a massive step change from what we're used to with regular just chatbots.
Totally. And I want to get your take on OpenClaw in a second as well, and then a few other things. But you also said something that because tools like Cowork, and there'll be others, I'm sure, they'll connect to almost anything, and over time they're going to connect to basically every piece of SaaS you use, every other piece of tool, whatever. there is a realistic future where most of the interaction we have on our desktops or on our phones is with an AI. And it's the one connecting to all the tools and pulling things together, doing what we want it to do. And so, just really, really fascinating. What's your take on OpenClaw? And for those that have been following the news, it's like, there's a tool that's had 3 or 5 names in the last week. It was Claude, CLAWD bot. Then Claude, who we've been talking about, was like, don't do that. That sounds just like our name. Then it was Molt bot. And then now I think they landed on OpenClaw. Who knows, by the time you listen to this, maybe something different. But what's your take on that? Because that has been wild. It's been such a big deal. Even my 23-year-old son, who's in the roofing business in sales, he bought an Apple Mac Pro or whatever a Mac Pro, and he's running it, on a local machine, and like it's doing some business development stuff for him. But what's your take on OpenClaw? Where is this taking us?
Well, for the people listening to this, that would probably be listening to this, right? I mean, the person who's like, hardcore and you want pure control and you want all that stuff. You're probably not listening to this show, But if you're a normal business person, you're running a company or you're in marketing or whatever, I think that there are essentially sort of 4 steps here that we can think about. So you've got your sort of chatbot. So regular ChatGPT 5.2 or whatever, regular Claude still available. That's level 1, right? Level 2 would be to kick up the Cowork, right? And I think by the end of this year, everybody will be in the working knowledge workspace, working on a computer. You'll be working in something like Cowork. It may not be Claude Cowork, but it'll be
something like it. Yeah,
Google's version of it or OpenAI's version or whatever. Then the third level would be something like Claude Code, or over at OpenAI, it's called Codex, where you're going straight to the tap, right? You're you're kicking past like any sort of UI, like user interface, and you're just going straight to the source. And there's a lot. You're already starting to get into pretty hardcore when you're doing that, because you're working in terminal, and you're having to use some coding languages and stuff like that. But it's doable. Like if you really committed to it,
it's vibe coding, right? So I mean, like you don't have to have a ton of programming knowledge, but maybe some, right? Or you're understanding prompts in a different way. Like could the average person just jump into Claude Code or something similar, or does that's going to take a little bit of work?
I think you could. It would be a longer learning curve than Claude Cowork, because what Claude Cowork is it's Claude Code with a UI sitting on top of it.
Yeah, I got it.
And what happens when you do that is it puts some restrictions on you. Like you're not going straight to the source where it's just like you can do anything in here. Because you've got the restrictions of that sort of harness that's sitting over the top of Claude Cowork. So going straight to Claude Code is like level 3. And then you get into the open source stuff where like your son has to buy, wants to buy an extra computer because he doesn't want that open source, sort of no guardrails AI to be on his own machine.
Right.
You want to create a confined space.
Into his email, he's like creating a separate email on a separate browser and a separate machine. But
and people are like daisy chaining like 10, 20, 100 Macs together and creating armies of employees that don't exist. With Slack accounts and email accounts and all these things. I would say the average person, level 4 is forget about it. Like it's so powerful, and it really is. It's not that it's not powerful, but it's precisely because it's so powerful that you shouldn't rush to install it. Just pump the brakes a minute, because what's going to happen is some more secure company is going to release something, and Claude Code is already just insanely powerful if you just go straight to Claude Code.
Yep.
And you still have a lot of guardrails there.
Yeah.
The thing that I would point out,
there's all kinds of unlocks, all kinds of stuff you can do. A whole world open up to you in those levels 1 through 3 that you don't need, or 1 through 4. You don't need to go OpenClaw just yet.
And I think Cowork will be the place where most business people will park it and say, "Wow, like this is quite a lot of power."
And just so you know, we're not sponsored by Claude. We get no kickback from Cowork. We're just like, this is awesome. Like we're geeking out about it, using it, and so it's phenomenal. Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to point out, though, the other comment about OpenClaw that it raised is that so in the summer, I started to realize like I was doing so much hefty work with AI tools and running Zoom and other things that my laptop was a beast, but it wasn't able to keep up. And I do think that we as business people need to be thinking about our own tech the way that a lab thinks about how many GPUs they have. Like starting to think about what is the processing power of your company, of any individual in your company. So like I went ahead and bought like a pretty hefty Mac Mini because I was like, I don't want to be constricted by my computer. So that's kind of interesting, right? That you start to think about like your own. I mean, you always think about you don't want your computer to be slowing you down, but like at this point, it's sort of like, you're going to see Apple just pick up a giant windfall from like.
Well, their stock is already up, right? Just because so many people are buying Mac Minis.
Yeah, all the hardware that's needed, that Apple Silicon is what everybody's after. And it's wild to think about like, somebody like your son who's, young and like starting out in a business, like having essentially desks with nobody sitting at them, but there's people working,
and he's just eating it up. Yeah, he's in roofing sales, and so he's like, Dad, I'm going to reach out to like all these insurance agents, and I want to get them, an email here, and then I'm going to drop by their office and get them donuts. I'm going to do these things, and then I want this to be able to respond via email over here, and like pull together my calendar. And I've got these Notion apps, and like I'm loving it. I'm like, this is awesome, dude. Like, this is great. And also, I'm glad you're doing it on that machine because I'm not ready for OpenClaw, like not for OMG, heck no. But I want to see it, and I'm all in on Cowork and figuring that out. And so, one quick thing though, I saw like using AI. Still, the ROI can be amazing, and like it's low cost compared to what it should be based on the power of the tool, but we start using Cowork or OpenClaw or whatever, like you can start to you're spending more on these tools, right? This is not necessarily the $20 a month subscription, right? What are you seeing since you're like leaning hard into Cowork? What has that done to your monthly fees and your usage, and what kind of plans do you have to be on to make this work?
Well, I used the $100 a month max plan, but the fact they do have Cowork now available at that $20 a month. You probably will find that like heavy users of it, they're going to need that $100 a month plan. But I think it's if it's being used right, it's just a no-brainer for $100 a month
for an assistant. Okay, plus.
Yeah, I think that with the proper setup and structure. See, I've always said that these AI tools are extremely useful, but even going back to my last time on this show where I was talking so much about context, I mentioned that a little bit today about how if you're not giving it any context about your offer, your persona, like don't be surprised if you're just not getting anything out of it.
Right.
And that sort of blows up when you start to think about how something like Cowork can access really any context when it thinks it needs it, and it can find it. Like it can find it in your machine. So when you go back to your example around the finances, when you talked about your sales goals and all these different documents. I know how organized you guys are at OMG. It's impressive. And you guys document a lot of things, and you have goals, and you have rocks, and you have quarterly and yearly plans and all that stuff. And that kind of stuff all can be brought into your Claude Cowork space.
Yeah.
And so and the way to do this, honestly, is when you're playing with it, is to ask, like, take something like a quarterly plan or something, drop it in, and say, here's the quarterly plan. Where do you think this should be most properly structured inside of Claude, right? And let it before you go and decide where it goes and where to put it. Like, ask it to think it through, so that go analyze that file and start to connect it. Well, and I see this skill over here where you run a financial analysis. I see this skill here, and maybe the best thing would be to organize it this way. And it'll ask you, like, does that sound good? And you say, yeah. And it starts to build out. There's a file at the very central core of Claude called the Claude MD file, Claude.md file, which is basically you can put anything in there. But what you do is you just tell Claude, keep updating that Claude MD file, because what it's doing is it's telling Claude, like, how does this structure work? Like, it's sort of like a central plan, right, as to how Claude is supposed to interact with your. So anytime you use Claude, it will access that Claude.md file. So that's the thing, is that the more you give it, and there's definitely an unreasonable amount of stuff you could give it, but like things like that, it's like, well, that's really something that I consult my own brain when I work on my finances. You might consider, like, should I drop this into the Claude Cowork space so that it has access to that? And you should be shocked at, like, wow, it realized it needed to go look at that, and then go grab the skill, and then connect over here to HubSpot, and then, you know what I mean? Like, right.
It just
that's what I mean when I say
agentic,
right? So agentic.
Yeah. It's amazing. Well, let's do this. I know you talked about a couple of workflows that you built for content creation, and I think this maybe is around your newsletter, but do you want to actually share that? We're going to talk through it for those people that are just listening and not watching, but would that be worthwhile to kind of dig into?
Yeah, let's.
I'm curious, while you're doing that, are you using Gemini at all? And are you leaning into Gemini gems or Gemini as a tool?
Yeah. So I use Gemini almost purely for image generation.
Oh, nice.
So
Nano Banana.
That Nano Banana model is just still,
it's pretty insane,
the thing. But yeah, let me run through this workflow. Maybe it'd be helpful to a lot of people to see how. Is that going full screen for you?
Yep, totally see it. Yep. So it's full screen. So for those watching on YouTube, they'll see it. For those listening, we'll do our best to describe it and make it come to life in your mind's eye.
Yeah. Well, so this is really about creating any content or copy of any kind. It could be text, images, video, audio, like any kind of content is. I started to realize it, as you know, like, if I had to be pegged to any one digital marketing discipline, it would probably be content marketing. And and it's the biggest reason why I hopped on AI so fast, because I saw it creating content. And I was like, wow, like, this thing can actually create things. So as the years have gone by, I mean, using this, getting better and better and better at creating content and copy with AI tools. And I started to realize there's this underlying process that constantly gets used over and over and over again. And it's really this source, structure, format, polish sort of steps. And the way it works is that the first step is the source. So if I'm going to create a piece of copy, like a sales page, an email, an ad, or any content like a video or anything, it doesn't matter. There's got to be some source, right? And most people that are failing with content creation, copy creation with AI, they start with the AI, and they start to say, well, come up with the idea, and then write the idea, or come up with the idea, and and so it's like, well, where are you in this scenario, right? Like, where is your voice? Where is your brand? Where is you? Where are you? And so when we think about setting up any sort of workflow to create something, the first step is to figure out, well, where am I going to get this source material from? And that source material can either come from you, in other words, your brain, or from internally in your organization, or it could come from outside. It's the same as before AI.
Yep.
So from a standpoint of you might, rant into your phone or something, some idea that you have, right? Or maybe you do podcast interviews like this one, right? Or maybe you shoot videos, or maybe you do webinars, or you write, or something. Like there needs to be if it's going to come from you, at some point, some idea has got to come out of your brain and essentially your mouth. If it's going to come from elsewhere, that's great too. You can go and grab source material from all over. I've said many times that the web doesn't necessarily need more content.
Yeah.
There is a great service to be done in curation of content, right? Like, this is good. Like, I read 10 articles. Here's the one you should read, right?
Yep.
And so you can go and curate from elsewhere, but you got to have something that the AI is starting with.
Yep.
Now, step 2 is to structure that in some way. So, the fact is, if you go and rant into your phone an idea, that's a great way to create a source. But it's not in any structure that you can do something
not usable,
with.
not valuable, not shareable. Really, it's just brain dump.
So typically, like a workflow might look like, first I get this raw input. Let's say it's a rant into the phone, and then I take that and I put some kind of structure around it. Like the two best ones, in my opinion, are a set of bullets or into a table. Right. So you just tell the AI, hey, take this input, whether it's a rant, a transcript, somebody else's YouTube video, somebody else's article. It doesn't matter if it came from you, but it's got to have a source. And then take that and organize it in this structure. And that's a second pass with an AI. So the first pass is ingest this or go get this source. The second pass with the AI is now organize it in some structured format. Then the third is to literally format thing into whatever structure you want that piece of content, whatever's going to come out the other side. So if I have a rant into a phone, that's just me rambling as I'm driving up to the gym or something, and I save that and then I drop it into the AI. The first pass is to ingest it and then take it and organize it into a table or into a set of bullets. And then the third pass might be, and here's how to take that and organize it into a LinkedIn post for me. And that's a third pass with an AI. So it's not one pass. It's not, it needs separate instructions at each step along the way. And then that last step is to polish. So bring it up to published quality. And that could be a combination of you and the AI, or it could be just you, or it could be just AI for those of us that are wanting to automate our lives completely away, and just are publishing things to LinkedIn and elsewhere. But I have found that this structure reoccurs no matter what I'm building, is that I need to figure out where's the content coming from, like where's the idea? How do I organize it in a way that's useful? How do I then transform it into whatever, do I want a script to come out of that? Well, that's fine. Do I want a written post? Do I want a cartoon? Do I want a slide for a presentation or a set of slides? Anything is possible. I take the source, I give it some structure to organize it so I can look at it. Oftentimes there's some curation that happens here, by the way. You get it into a table and you're like, just take ideas 3, 10, and 12 and then move it on to step 3, which is, how do I take this? It's just you almost think about this, just a set of rules that you keep moving things through. And then that last step could be, add a brand voice to it using AI, or do like we have always done, type, actually edit.
Wait a minute, like we're in there typing and editing like Neanderthals.
What's up with that?
What is this? So what does this look like then? Is this maybe a 4-step process just inside of our favorite chat interface? Are we pulling something together that's a little more agentic? What are you recommending here?
Well, and that's going to depend on the tool and the actual process. But take a look at this. This is just how I put my newsletter together here. So the step one is deep research. That's a great place to go get a whole bunch of source material. So you tell an AI, hey, I want you to go out there. This is for a newsletter, this example. So I want you to go out there and find the 10 best stories about X that are most popular. I want you to check Twitter. I want you to check here and there. Right. And it comes back and I want you to structure that as.
Do you have a favorite tool there? So for deep research, I know they're all getting better. They're all good. But like, what are you using there?
I use ChatGPT for that. But now with Cowork, it doesn't ever call it deep research. It just it just goes into research mode. Like it's not like, you know how in the past it's been like, I am now entering deep research. You know what I mean? It's like, you know,
you select it. Like, I want you to do deep research. Go. You know?
Yeah. No. I mean, like they sort of evaporated that because, you know, it's just like we're entering. You know, it's just over there doing things, and it'll just enter into more of a deep research mode where it might be gone for 10 minutes. Like I said, I spin up another task and work on something else.
Yep.
But in this case, I use deep research. You can use any tool. Pretty much has deep research now. You create a prompt, and you could create a prompt and save that prompt. If something you use over and over again.
Yep.
Have it come back. And my big thing about deep research is that it usually brings you back this report that's like, okay, I guess there's my afternoon, you know, to read this freaking report.
4 hours to read that.
So what I'll do is I'll tell the AI, don't bring me back this big long report. Structure it into a table. Right. I love tables, right? I love organizing,
scannable,
especially things that come back.
Easy to digest. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine in this scenario that I have 10 stories, you know, from various news outlets. It's not my ideas. This is other people's ideas that I went and had the AI go and grab together. And then this next step represents a set of rules as to how this particular story needs to be transformed. So I just pull up. I use Beehive for my newsletter. And you can see this is a story that I ran last week. You know, I put this Jerry Seinfeld gif. OpenAI is putting ads in ChatGPT because GPUs don't pay for themselves. And there's a structure to how this story works. You know, it's the facts and then why I think this matters to my audience. And so all I do is create another pass of the AI that says, go in here, grab whichever story that Russ wants. Right? So Russ curated story 3, let's say, and apply this set of rules to it. And that set of rules then spits out on the other side a formatted piece of content. And then that last step is to polish it, edit it, get it right, check the links, fact check the story in this case, right? But it's always different. But the same deep research is used to create another block of my newsletter called, it's actually called By the Numbers, but I used to call it Stat of the Week. And all I do is I take a story in here, like let's say story 5 in the list has a good stat in it. And I'm like, that's good to share. And I say, okay, run Stat of the Week rules on story 5. And it outputs a different output. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
And then
so
ultimately
at the table, we're telling it then take these ideas, run this process. It's the source structure. What was the third one?
Format.
Polish it. Yeah.
Polish it. Yeah. And then the third idea here is the tool of the week. So if I find something that's like, okay, that's a bad, nice tool there. I really, I've played with it. I want to bring it up. So I've got a structure on that. So it's the same set of research, 3 different outputs, right? And the difference is that this set of rules is different for each of those structures. And if you think about this from a standpoint of building any content or copy, if you can, what is the story? It doesn't have to be deep research, of course. It could be a rant. It could be a transcript. It could be a YouTube video. It could be any place that, that we generate ideas, then take that, get it into some format, right? Like, I almost always recommend bullets or tables, because from there, once you get that stuff into a table, you can then say, okay, apply these rules and apply these rules. Now, if I take this one step further and go into Cowork and how Cowork works, the way let's first start with how ChatGPT still works, would be if I want to format it this way and this way and this way, I would need 3 different GPTs. I would have to stop and I would have to call that GPT or copy and paste a prompt. And instead, what I do is I say, take story 1, turn it into a news story format, take story 4, turn it into stat of the week, take story 6 and turn it into tool of the week. And it's got all those skills saved in there and it just goes and runs, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, right? And so, and if I get to the end and I'm like, I really don't like how you're writing those headlines for the news story, I want you to change it so that it works this way. And then it'll just say, cool, I changed that. And do you want me to update the skill? And it's like, yeah. So that next time I run it, it's done. So it's sort of that self-healing idea that we talked about earlier.
I love it. This is fantastic. I could spend another hour going through this stuff. Actually, I would like to because I've got like a million questions for you now. I guess so. We are running out of time. So I guess the next thing is we got to have you back for the 10th time or whatever it is. So we'll for sure do that. But where can people find more? So you got a community called TheClick.ai. Talk to us a little bit about that. And then also your great follow on LinkedIn and other places. So talk about that as well.
Yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn and even message me over there. I'm always on LinkedIn all day long. The Click.ai has 2 components to it. It has a membership for individuals, and then I do team training and implementation for teams. So both of those things you can find on the Click.ai. The membership is really about using AI to do business work. These tools they're general purpose technologies. They're like electricity or something. We have electricities everywhere and it's used for dang near everything. So AI is the same, right? It wasn't built for business and it wasn't built for science and it wasn't built for education. It was built for all those things. And there's no instruction manuals out there for each one of these, massive things that we can do. And this is a big time tech transformation. And so the membership is there for people that are trying to figure out, how do I use these tools to do real business work? And I do think that we are entering in, you mentioned that 2026 is going to be a big year. I do think this Claude Cowork jump is a big one. And we are going to start seeing a gap between both individuals and companies that adopt this stuff and, start to get more out of the same team,
Totally.
It's just crazy. So,
and that's what I've heard recently. It's like, we shouldn't be fearful that AI is coming for our jobs. Most people, there are going to be some exceptions, so I don't want to downplay that. But hearing people talk on podcasts, like the team members that really understand AI, and maybe they can both vibe code and use Claude Cowork or whatever. Like they become worth 2 or 3 or 4 employees to you, right? And so that improves someone's marketability and someone's earning potential. It doesn't diminish it. And so, but yes, the gap is going to be widening between those that embrace this and excel at it and the companies that embrace it and excel at it and those that don't. The gap is going to widen for sure.
Yeah. An interesting number right now to look at is revenue per employee, right?
I love that
how
number.
much, how big can you mentioned I was with digital marketer and I was texting with Richard Lindner the other day, and we were talking about how many people would it taken for us to get DM to wherever we got. It was like 25 million or something. And by the time we did that, we had 80 people.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there thinking, man, we could have done that with 4 or 5 people, maybe. So, with these tools.
It's crazy what's possible now. Crazy. Yeah, for sure. It's awesome, man. Really appreciate it. I do want to maybe jam with you one-on-one because I got some stuff we got to talk about, maybe get you in for some training. And so for those listening, do that as well. Check out the Click.ai, hire Russ, put these tools to work for your business. With that, Russ, thanks, man. Ton of fun. Looking forward to the next time.
Good to see you, buddy.
Absolutely. And as always, thank you for tuning in. We'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review on iTunes or wherever if you haven't done it. Also, if you found this episode helpful, share it with somebody else you think will benefit from it. And with that, until next time, thank you for listening. Hey, as we wrap up this week's episode, I want to mention, if you're a great brand, if you're scaling high 7, 8, 9 figures in D2C or omni-channel, we should potentially talk. We've worked with some of your favorite brands, and we'd love to consider working with you as well. We are masters at unlocking new channels like YouTube, unlocking new scale on platforms like Amazon, where we can add up to 8 figures in new growth. And we've got multiple ways we can work with you. So we can do the full service thing and work like a partner with your team and really run everything. Or we can offer consulting. So maybe you've got an internal team that really knows their stuff, but there's an area they don't know really well and they'd like to get some consulting. We can do that. We also have tons of free guides, free resources, free materials you can check out. All of that gets started at omgcommerce.com. And we can't wait to help you scale profitably.